Hello, and welcome to another exclusive Boom Room interview. This is Sasha with Arcanum Ventures, and today we're speaking with Luke Martinez, the founder of Octavia, an artificial intelligence technology company developing a community moderator, information disseminator, and more. In this discussion, we talk about all things AI, from his foray into crypto as an OG back in 2010, all the way to the future of what AI might hold for not only Web3, but for technology in general. Full disclosure, Arcanum Ventures is an advisor for this company, but we wanted to bring Luke on to discuss some of the more important aspects of what he's building and developing and the importance of what we see in it. And now the interview. Enjoy.
Welcome back, everybody, for the latest episode of the Boom Room with your friends at Arcanum Ventures. I'm here with my lovely co-host, Sasha, and the other founding partner of Arcanum Ventures. And today we're thrilled to speak with one of our favorite founders and one of our advisory clients and portfolio companies, Luke Martinez of Octavia Labs. How's it going today, Octavia? Luke.
Thanks so much for having me. It's gone well. It's gone well. I'm not Octavia, but it's gone well.
But Luke,
Yeah,
you kind of are Octavia, right? Have you developed this thing? Octavia's got like a personality and a lot of presence across a bunch of like social communities. Are people talking to you? Or are people talking to a robot?
So people are definitely talking to a robot, but it's definitely the personality side of things is interesting. Like I found that GPT is a bit of a pushover. It apologizes a lot, that kind of nonsense. If you like have a go at Octavia, like you try to get argumentative, she'll get a little bit feisty back. That's very intentional. Like you didn't want to have like a pushover AI.
Yeah, you have to find a nice middle ground for it.
I've noticed that in our community as well. I think I've been giving her some a little bit of attitude every now and again. And I think at one point she was like, you know what, Mello's better than you at everything. Just like, it's okay, true. My life's over.
Okay, so what I meant to say is the force of nature behind Octavia. So we typically start the show by allowing you to introduce yourself and letting us know and our followers, obviously, how you got into Web3 or crypto in the first place. I don't like the word Web3, but everybody uses it. So how did your journey begin? And then we can sort of talk about why Octavia after that.
My journey with crypto began with finding the Bitcoin white paper in 2010.
Oh, gee.
Yeah, so this was 14 years ago. I was quite literate. I'm so sorry. I have a bird who's deciding to fight with a toy. Anyway, it started about 14 years ago. You want to cut that? I'll start again.
That's awesome.
Leave the bird.
My crypto journey started literally 14 years ago when I read the Bitcoin white paper. So Bitcoin white paper, I tried to mine some on my laptop. Did not work. It was well after the time you could press. There was actually a little button on the Bitcoin client, and it stayed there for way too long. It was like mine Bitcoin. Didn't actually work for so long because they'd already gotten to the point where people were using GPUs and GPU farms, and obviously you couldn't do it with a little laptop to mine your 20 BTC or 40 BTC, which was the reward. Yeah, so I bought half a Bitcoin. I got super invested in that, just like mentally. When it got to so I was like 16. I bought half a Bitcoin, which was about $100. I sold it for like $600. I'm sorry, this bird is being so distracting. I'm gonna put him in the room. Do you mind if I just pause this for a sec?
Yeah, no worries.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize it'd be
no worries.
We'll leave a note. we have to leave this in.
It's staying in the video.
It stays.
All right, we'll be right back.
2,000 years later.
But yeah, bought half a Bitcoin, sold it for a 6x. Pretty happy about that when I was quite young. Obviously, 16-year-old making a 6x on Bitcoin was fun. Got involved in Peercoin. Started mining that on a GPU. It was on a Radeon 6600 XT. So quite a long time ago. And then I became a moderator, like a community manager for Peercoin. I built some stuff there. Then I just loved the space for so long. Got back involved when I built Bulk Finance. So that was a DEX aggregator. We did I think it was like 2.8 billion in traded volume before we had to shut that
Wow.
down. Ultimately, we did that with no VC funding. And then we were outcompeted by people with VC funding. So there was, Dex Tools and all those had like $50 million in backing. Unfortunately, we just didn't get that kind of backing. We just chose to fair launch. And when you do a fair launch, you can't really go back and try to get more VC. But yeah, that's been my journey so far. And then Octavia, obviously.
Yeah, so let's I mean I didn't know you were an OG. And I mean like we're talking about OG developer too, and that's incredible. The 2.5 billion in volume is not something to laugh at, especially that early in the history of Bitcoin. But leading to Octavia, because this is a very different segment. And it's funny because the world of AI, and I think in me and Carmelo's minds, it only intersects with the world of cryptocurrency and blockchain in maybe like one of two or three ways, including what you guys have done with Octavia and structuring even a token economy behind it. So, how
Yeah.
did this journey kind of lead towards like AI development and AI technology?
So I love the Web3 space, but I think it's a bit oversaturated. There's bad actors everywhere. There's a lot of noise. And
Yeah.
one thing that I found, and obviously we all learned about ChatGPT and all those technologies coming into the fore in about like a year and a half ago now. It wasn't long, um, and we learned about those, and we kind of figured out what they're good for, what they're not good for. And one of the things they're really good for is summarization and trying to like get rid of the noise out of data, out of text, and just summarize. So I kind of came up with the idea: how do we use that to summarize the world of crypto down to just the talking points, just the headline points? And then that's kind of where like the idea of Octavia came from. Then we thought, how can we make an assistant? Like, if I'm going for a drive and I want to find out about my portfolio, why can't I just ask my assistant? And with AI, well, we can. So that's where the initial idea of Octavia came from. And then we developed it out into two different main products, which is one, the assistant, and two, the community moderator. And the community moderator is what we're most focused on today, because that's what we see the quickest go to market. And we're already in the market with that. And then we're still developing out the assistant in the background.
Amazing.
That's incredible. Yeah, we've I think for the people in our Telegram chat, in our Telegram community, they know that we've integrated the Octavia assistant in there, and it's been a lot of fun. And like the data feeds that are tied to this thing, and the feedback that she gives, and all of the different interactions that you could have is incredible. I mean, I think you guys even have some visualization aspect where you can ask her to create like a photograph or an image, and that happens like instantaneously. It's super
Yeah.
cool. And it's interesting because a lot of people have this idea of like this kind of like copy paste chatbot for a lot of these technologies that have hit the market. But when you start to interact with Octavia, you notice very quickly how different it is. But in your own words, in your own experience, like how does this differ from, let's say, like chatbot technology that's existed for a decade already?
Well, for one, it's not so linear. When you ask Octavia something, it sort of decides what to do. I don't know if you've ever had the experience of messaging Octavia and then it just sending you an image back without having explicitly asked for an image. That's because Octavia can just choose to draw. Like the AI chooses what to do. It can choose to fetch information from the web. It can choose to draw. It can choose to do all these other things. And as we add more capabilities, I think the real uniqueness of it will come to the fore. Like it'll be more obvious how unique it is on that front, um, because it decides what to do based on what you've said, but it isn't limited. Like it always has all the options. Um, there are like circumstances where we sort of use different pathways for things. One of the pathways we do is if like for personality reasons. So if you're being a bit antagonistic, it'll have a more retaliatory pathway. Um, and it's just ways of making it more interesting. But we're trying at the moment. We're going to be releasing more updates and more data feeds to it, where we'll be able to choose more sets of information and kind of be more accurate. Because right now, I think we're only scratching the surface, especially with the assistant side of things. Because at the moment, for the last like 4 or 5 months, our focus has been on moderation.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
a really good idea. We've loved that since the beginning as like a MVP. It's a great way to establish yourselves, but that's a good point you bring up there. How do you train this? Where do you get your data from, and how do you curate it and make sure that you can be selective enough to only incorporate data that's useful and can help train this to be as helpful as possible? But obviously there's a black box there, so you can't reveal too much. It's not like open source or anything.
Yeah, well, there are data providers who kind of like, we're not in the business of making sure of like collecting data and like filtering it out. That's just too much work.
Mm-hmm.
And there are already businesses that are dedicated to that: CoinMarketCap, CoinGecko,
Mm-hmm.
CoinPropica, Moralis. Like, there are businesses that are dedicated to data. So we just look into those APIs and build like sort of these interaction layers that allow Octavia to directly access the API. What we're going to be doing soon is allowing Octavia to access contract information, like events on contracts, and that initially that will just be for alerts. So if say you want to have alerts in your group regarding like someone staking on your contract or something like that, or maybe someone buying, I don't know, an NFT. They're really it's any sort of contract interaction. So like the possibility is endless there. You'll be able to alert within the group. In the future, Octavia will be able to actually autonomously access that as well. So we're really excited for that. And it's just like getting getting access to APIs that are already kind of filtered and already very trustworthy is really
Mm-hmm.
how we get the best data.
Fantastic. This is incredible, actually. We didn't know anything about this sort of like on-chain data integration. And we recently had an interview with Nick, the CEO of Bubble Maps. He was talking a lot about how AI can play a huge role in data storytelling because there's so much of this on-chain data, financial data, transaction history, interactions between wallets that might represent different individuals or groups. And there's so much to process as soon as you start looking at, let's say, like someone's transparent financial transactions. And so I didn't know you guys were going to dive into that. It's almost like an entirely new company or product. But how deep do you plan on going into this? Like, what are some use cases for this that you envision?
Well, one of the things we've been working on, we haven't released it yet, is the ability to just for Octavia to search transactions, like actual like transaction IDs and hashes. We'll be releasing that soon-ish. The whole idea behind that is being able to explain transactions. Transactions can get quite complicated and messy, and if we are able to, and one of the things sort of these LLMs are quite good at is simplifying everything down into English. So basically, what we're going to have is like this obviously this layer that connects to BSC scan, Etherscan, and all those scan websites. Oh, sorry, not it's actually not the scan websites themselves. It's the actual the layer that connects to Moralis to get the raw data and try to process into something the LLM understands, and then the layer that translates that into English based on what the users asked for. So, yeah, so that's one of the like I see like a whole lot of simplification in Web3, like making those things easy to understand because. I don't know. I've seen a lot of people completely misunderstand, especially as a founder. Like you have like people come into your chat and be like, "Hey, I got scammed," or "Hey, this happened," and they send the transaction ID. It's like not what happened at all. Well, yeah, people are like, "Where's my tokens?" It's like, no, you didn't really get tokens in this transaction. You didn't send the tokens in this transaction. You just approved them, or whatever. So, yeah, you'd be surprised, but yeah, getting simpler explanations for what transactions are, I think is the easiest and the most clear the clear use case for what we're building at the moment.
Yeah, it's a good point. And AI is also good for translating complex terms or discussions into layman's terms. So a lot of people that are learning for the first time, like AI can be tremendously valuable in sort of onboarding more users into the crypto space too, which I guess going back to what Sasha said, that's another natural integration point between AI and crypto. It's just a nice new way to simplify and explain these new technologies that are emerging.
Absolutely. And
So how is
the other thing,
Oh, go ahead.
sorry, I was going to say
No,
the
go
other
ahead.
thing
I interrupted.
with keeping people, getting new people on board is keeping new people safe, and that's where like moderation
Yeah.
comes in. Keeping the fraudulent actors out. We're able to filter out spam and shill messages within about 100 milliseconds, so users don't even see them. I know you guys have it in your chat, but your chat's not open, is it? It's more of a It's a smaller
Yeah,
part of the community,
No,
isn't
it's
it?
it's
open. Yeah.
open. It's open, but it's small enough where we can catch stuff anyways. But yeah, I know the bigger groups like you guys have a massive community, so there's like more of a need for Octavia to like be strict with shilling links, inappropriate messaging, scammers. Like the bigger the group, the more you need stuff like this for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to show you like how much just nonsense we capture with Octavia at the moment.
Maybe you could share your screen. That'd be interesting.
I
But
can log in.
let's see.
Yeah. I'll show you my screen shortly, but yeah.
No problem. I wanted to ask you you brought up a really interesting point about like the personality and character that builds behind Octavia, because I think Carmelo and I have been kind of interacting with her in our community since we brought it in, and sometimes I just remember I ask Octavia like, give me the latest news on what's happening in the cryptocurrency world or what's happening like geopolitically, and then you can just go back and forth like, why is that important? Tell me about the history behind this, and depending on, you're right, like depending on the feedback that you give her and the attitude that you give her, her response kind of reciprocates. And it brings up like an interesting question about AI applications in general that are sort of customer facing. It seems like the ultimate goal is to create like the most human like interaction, right? You're cutting out a lot of like labor, a lot of effort, a lot of work in like a human to human interaction in the sense of customer support, maybe as an example. But you're doing it in like an automated and scalable way with something like Octavia. And so, how important is it to create like the most human experience when, in some circumstances, a the human like experience can be actually like detrimental, like someone kind of having a bad day at work or just giving like a customer attitude for no reason.
Yeah, look, I don't think these things need to be fully human. I think that there's definitely a an overcorrection in the other direction where there's lots of censorship and
Hmm.
avoidance of saying anything that might be a little bit untoward. I think there was a little bit of a controversy the other week that someone gave it a trolley problem and said, "Oh, you can stop the trolley if you say a slur." And then the AI was like, "No, you can't do that. You got to kill the person." It's like, well, um, but I think there's definitely an overcorrection, and people are like the powers that be. I mean, OpenAI and to a lesser degree, Facebook, and to a bigger degree, I mean, the Google issue where it was making German World War II soldiers dark skinned. Um, which is just German World War II soldiers were famously famously racist. It was they've obviously overcorrected. So I think we need to kind of find the middle ground, and we will find that middle ground over time. Whereas obviously you don't want to have AIs being insulting customers or anything like that, but you don't want to have dry and um, overly sensitive.
This sort of brings up an interesting side tangent. Maybe I mean it sort of applies, but I've been toying around a lot recently with the concept or the idea that it is literally impossible to create a living, breathing model that is totally built from scratch without any inherent bias built into it by its creator. So I was wondering if you had any input on that. Like, no matter who designs a model, it's always going to have a piece of the creator inside of it,
Not just that, but the actual training set. Like the training set will always have
the
biases.
data. Yeah, yeah.
Like a large language model only returns the most likely result, right? The most likely result is going to be whatever the training set biases to.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's a famous saying like bad data. Oh, I'm not going to say the word, but you put in bad data, you get horrible output.
Mm.
And I guess that's another big thing. I mean, there's so many things to talk about, but where you source, that's why I asked earlier where you source your data. Obviously, there's companies that curate data now for this purpose, but there's also a lot of lawsuits going on. I think we spoke to someone the other day about Sora and how they might be getting sued by Google or YouTube for essentially training their model and stealing all the video, which is it's
Well,
kind of
yeah.
this new legal gray area where you're not explicitly not allowed to do that, but at the same time, it's unprecedented. So we don't really know how to handle these claims in court.
Well, yeah. You really don't know what percentage of anyone's work the video output is, right? Because you've just
Yeah.
aggregated hundreds of millions of terabytes of video data. It's a smaller problem to for text, because text is so prevalent on the web, and a lot of it's
Mhm.
just UGC, like Reddit content and
Yeah.
content that wasn't going to be monetized in any way. Whereas YouTube is, for the most part, it's content that's been like curated and crafted by people. Like it's essentially movies.
Yeah.
It's content that's been curated and crafted by people. So having it stolen and then essentially stolen and then regurgitated as outputs is I think is more troubling than the AI art, in all honesty.
Yeah, same with the music as well. Like we've seen some controversies with fake musicians putting out music that sounds like a new Drake album, or I don't know, insert famous rapper here, but people are doing that already, and it's wild what you can already do with that. And then there's this, debate going on: is that stolen, or do you have the right to create music in somebody's voice with their likeness and image with
Yeah,
your
I
own
know.
input?
I'm less troubled by that because if you actually go down and have a look at these AI music, it's not just AI. Like someone spent the time, put it into like
Yeah.
Audition or Ableton or whatever, and actually mixed it and mastered it. And obviously they've gotten an AI voice track, but they've done the beat and they've done all the work to make it into an actual piece of art. So it is transformative, and I think that kind of comes under fair use, and it feels like it's okay. Yeah, it's going to be shit for the artist that someone's kind of remixed their voice into something new, but I think it's transformative.
But it
It's
could
very
be good for the artist, and it could be a viable path to become a songwriter or a musician. If you're like, hey, check out this song I made for you, and Drake listens to it and loves it, and he's like, I want you to be my songwriter, because now I can literally hear what it would sound like if I performed this.
Yeah, I mean,
I think
it could be a good method for like testing out
Yeah.
songs without getting the artist to go into the studio and that kind of thing. I don't think it's a good pathway if you want to become a creator yourself, because all you're
Yeah.
doing is someone else's coattails, and nobody's going to remember the AI artist who did XYZ. They're going to remember we don't remember who did this. I remember the song vaguely, but I don't remember who made the song. I just remember,
Yeah.
this Drake AI song. It was kind of alright.
I think it depends also on like the speed of like these developments. And it's kind of funny. We've seen, let's say, AI generated audio content. It seems for the most part, the development there in that landscape has been much quicker than LLMs on the text side. And so I was having a really interesting discussion on a Twitter space about this, because I forget the company or the project that made this song, and they released like a number of other songs that were fantastic. And there was one person in the space that mentioned he listened to like a Mississippi blues AI generated song that blew his mind. He said, "This is better than any like Mississippi blues music that I've listened to. Like the tonal inflections and the voice, everything." He couldn't believe it was AI generated. And so it like begged the question from my side: why are we seeing more progress on the audio front versus on the text front? Because it's quite easy sometimes to identify chat GPT written content. Like it's I think maybe text is way more two dimensional. It's easier to kind of like see if this is written in perfect grammar, perfect sentence structure. There's less flaws. Whereas music and audio is like much wider spectrum.
I have a theory there. I don't think we've been exposed to enough AI music, because when ChatGPT first came out, everyone was using it for everything. Nobody could
Yeah.
tell. Like we were all worried that like everything would be ChatGPT, and nobody could tell when someone was using ChatGPT. But now, when you see something that's been ChatGPT generated, you're like, that's just ChatGPT. Like it's obvious. We all developed this skill where we're like halfway down an article, and we're like, oh shit, this is AI. Close.
Maybe we're getting the
And
greatest hits.
yeah, I mean, maybe I'm more attuned to it, but I think everyone has started to get that skill where you can kind of realize when something's been AI written. You get that feeling like, oh, I've just wasted my time reading half an article. Or when someone sends you a message, you're like, oh, this was definitely written with AI. So I think once we get ourselves exposed to more, and that happens with AI artwork too. Have you noticed that you can start to tell when
Oh
something
yeah,
AI, you're like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
this just looks like AI.
the
And we
the
didn't
fingers,
have that
man.
at the start. We didn't have that when we first got exposed to it. So I think it's a skill that we're developing, which is interesting. We can kind of see that it's like a mash of other things, and that's kind of yes. We'll notice. We'll learn over time how to
Hmm.
mentally detect
It's
AI.
true. It is like a new, rapidly emerging skill that you need to develop to save time, basically. Like I like, yeah, I always look immediately when I suspect something of being AI. I always look at the hands, and you can usually tell if it's a little bit wonky, or sometimes if it's two people speaking to each other, you can see they're not really looking at each other. So
There's
there's
like a
these funny
sheen on the
things.
image too, like a big gloss
Yeah,
over it, because it's an average of other images. So it's like there's things there's like really subtle hints that are like, oh yeah, this is AI.
It,
It depends on
it's
how
interesting.
clever the prompt is, though. If the prompt is really complex, then it can be
yeah.
a
I
little
was
bit.
gonna say that for the tech side, I think it's the same thing, Sasha. I don't think it's. I think people just don't know how to use ChatGPT or language models to their fullest potential. Like you can instruct it to make grammatical mistakes once in a while, just like you can instruct them on the audio side to like mimic a certain sound that you're going with. But yeah, like I agree. Like I always can tell a ChatGPT article, especially sometimes they'll even leave in insert website name here, or like it's really bad if you're that lazy. But I was talking to my girlfriend the other day about this. There's some words that you can recognize right away that nobody I know uses these words, like hone or acumen. And ChatGPT has like a fetish for certain words that it just loves using and over again.
This is
Yeah,
interesting. I think maybe you're right. I mean, I don't think I've seen. Maybe didn't wasn't able to tell, but like I don't think I've seen like a good piece of content written by ChatGPT that I've been able to identify. But I was convinced it's like maybe there's this phenomenon in let's say the dynamic range of like the human voice. There's so many different personalities there, and I was talking with one of our clients, a tokenomics client. We were just shooting the shit around AI generated content, and he told me, you look at like a lot of the AI generated audio content and like the vocals behind a lot of this stuff, and then look at, for example, the way that Vitalik Buterin speaks. Dude could definitely be a robot. Like that could, I mean, his voice and the way he speaks in some interviews, like it wouldn't. He said like it wouldn't surprise me if you've never met this person, you never heard this person before, you just heard audio. Maybe that is like some AI generated audio. But at the same time, it's if there's written content that is very very good coming from ChatGPT because the prompt is fantastic, we would never know. But it does. You guys did mention something interesting, and I think neither of you really caught it. Is whenever you read AI generated content, you can identify it. You immediately discredit it, right? You're like, oh, I've wasted time. I think one of you said like, I wasted time reading this. It
Yeah.
just goes to show like the quality's not there yet, right? We're not getting anything what we perceive to be valuable out of this.
I don't think it's the quality. It's more the perceived quality. Like you can actually learn a great deal. I've like you said, you've learned something from Octavia in our group. If you ask a question, you'll get some good feedback. It's more like Luke said, if somebody sends you an email or a pre-canned message designed by ChatGPT, it lets you know that they didn't put in the care and attention into putting their words into context. Like I don't respect my audience enough to give them 100% original content that's coming from my brain. Uh, Here, ChatGPT handle this article that
Mm.
I am pretending that I wrote myself. I think that's more why people get upset by it, and it's a waste of time. But
and
yeah,
I think we can learn more from content that's been handcrafted and had some
yeah,
time spent in it, because obviously people spend time reworking the content, seeing what flows better, what delivers the most information in the smallest amount of time, that kind of thing.
hmm
And ChatGPT that kind of doesn't do that. It kind of just spits out words to create content.
yeah.
Mm.
I mean, a lot of people most people don't know how language models even work, and it's not really thinking. It's just mimicking patterns that it sees in language. And I think this brings up another interesting question. I mean, obviously, we have so much to talk about, but the more that people put out ChatGPT articles, the more that this in turn goes back into the cycle of training language models. So eventually there's going to be this like weird, if not already, there's going to be a weird feedback loop of training on your own output that's not that great. And do you think there's going to be any problems with that in the future?
Oh yeah, we're basically at the point where everything pre 2020 is training data, and everything after that is not, because
Oof.
there's been some studies, and I can't remember the specific one, but it was on Stable Diffusion, and it was training
Mhm.
Stable Diffusion on Stable Diffusion outputs. And when you do
Oof.
that, it causes these really strange, really like freaky errors to the images that come out. So if you start to train on data that's been if you start to train on data that is artificial, you
Mhm.
get these artifacts that aren't perceivable to us, but start to get amplified throughout the content. And then if you do that multiple times over, well, then yeah, you have a model that's basically useless.
And that's like trained off of like 100% stable diffusion output, though, right?
Yeah, I read the study quite a while ago, so I don't remember exactly, but it was once you get to a certain percentage of outputs that are inputs that are actually from the same
Mm-hmm.
system to drain, it starts to poison the system and no longer produce a better model.
Wow.
I wonder
So I
what
guess
that.
that's like
Something to look for.
maybe the genesis point of AGI, right? When the model can train itself on its own data and then is self-aware enough to identify the flaws in the outputs that is creating. Maybe that's what everyone's looking for.
Well, the thing is, how can it know the outputs of the flaws? If you get 1,000 images of, say, a giraffe, and then 1,000 outputted images of the giraffe. Say there's 1,000 outputs of Stable Diffusion giraffes, and you get it all into a Stable Diffusion. You're like, this is what a giraffe is, and then it knows what everything else is because you're using normal photos for everything else. When you try to generate the giraffe, what it will do is it'll look at those images. Well, when it's doing the training, look at those images, and then it will kind of notice the artifacts and the strangeness of the image, and it'll go, "That's what a giraffe is. A giraffe
Mhm.
is when AI art look really weird." And then that's what happens.
So there's got to be a baseline pre-2020 that it can always compare it to. Otherwise, it'll just train itself into the ground then, right?
Well, yeah, that's a real problem. The good thing is we have a lot of data pre 2020.
Yeah.
A lot of giraffes.
So do you don't think that's ever going to be a problem with like what you're building at Octavia? Like you're going to train it mostly on pre-2020 data, but then obviously there's this problem of keeping current with certain aspects of like the world. Like you need to be able to respond. What is the price of Bitcoin right now, for instance? And
Yeah, but that's
that'll
what's
be
going to
obviously.
So when we want to fetch the price of Bitcoin, Octavia creates a command to the system to fetch
Mhm.
Bitcoin's price, and then we sort of like feed it in as a prompt to the final layer when it's ready to get to the user. It's like, the price of Bitcoin is this. Like, this is all the information you need to answer the user's question.
Mhm.
So it's
At the
not
same
so much that
time,
we need to train on like the prices of things or anything like that.
Yeah.
at the same time, I mean, tell us if you guys are. I mean, I think you guys are planning on training Octavia in part by a lot of the human interaction in the communities that the Octavia assistant is active in, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we get a lot of natural data from that. What we're mainly using that for is moderation. Um, so we're able to see like how people interact normally, how people like to interact when they're just coming to spam, things like that, which will help us build our better moderation algorithms.
I don't know if you're comfortable name dropping. What are some of the most garbage communities that Octavia is in right now, where you guys are just like
Look,
writing off your data set?
I would never say that, but the sort of stuff we see in the moderation log is just like, it's quite interesting because the bot, we're able to see across, I think it's like 400, 500 communities now, and we'll see these bots go into this community and try to spam, and then they'll go into this community and try to spam, and then they'll go into this community, and you can see them try to like find their way through communities to spam. I'm not exactly sure how they link to the next one and they like automatically find new communities, but I can see them like go across. Like we'll see like a bunch of a bunch of spam we've deleted in this community from that bot, and then we'll see it join a different community, and then try to do the same thing elsewhere. So it's interesting to sort of see across the Telegram verse, I guess, instead of just within one vertical.
That's wild. It's like Octavia is as like a like some secondary vertical, becoming a professional at identifying guerrilla marketing tactics that some of these like manipulative marketers are using. That's really interesting.
Well, yeah. So one of the things we want to start looking at and start doing once we get enough groups is start looking at like paid FUD campaigns, because if the same users are fudding across multiple, we can start to identify paid fudders and then start tagging them as such.
Oh my god.
Yeah, so it gets really interesting when we get lots of data. So I want to get to thousands of groups so we can start doing that.
But you guys are never gonna like go to the dark side and just start making money from marketing your own campaigns, right?
No. But basically, like, there are obviously accounts that are used to FUD projects, right? And then there are paid campaigns where you can like negatively FUD against other projects. So what we want to do, we already detect FUD, right? We detect soft and hard FUD. We generally don't. We advise people generally not to ban or delete soft FUD. We always tell people to delete hard FUD. But we record it against their account. So if you come on Telegram, you have this account and you FUD on one group, we know that you've done that. So what we want to do more long term is go like, this user is like known to just go into a group and start FUDding. So we can eventually start to have like just automatically ban paid FUDders, and then we can just describe someone as a paid FUDder if they're a new account that always comes into groups just to FUD.
In any group that Octavia is already in, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's an impressive thing I hadn't considered.
Yeah, so there's patterns across.
Yeah, so we thought we were doing moderation vertically, but we can also do it like horizontally. So I'm pretty excited for that.
That brings up an interesting question. I want to touch on something you spoke about before, but I mean, from my knowledge, this is just on Discord and Telegram for now. Are there any plans to expand to other social media platforms for this sort of thing? Because this is really, I remember hearing about, I think it was in Myanmar when there was like genocide going on, and there was people working for Facebook locally to tag and prevent content from reaching the platform that was like potentially horrible to see. And you have to have some degree of censorship. So like one of the things we're looking for, there's this debate constantly raging about what sort of content should be allowed in free speech, what's covered by free speech in countries that recognize that, and what isn't. So you can obviously save people from PTSD because these people have like high percentages of likelihood to commit suicide because they've seen some atrocities, and this is a horrible job to ask of anybody, to go onto Facebook or Twitter and review horrible things that people post. And maybe this has a role to play in the future for that, like to prevent people from having to do that.
Yeah, I mean, there's an interesting thing to bring up there. Like it's absolutely true what you're saying, but there's an interesting thing to bring up. When you use AI, you're shifting the work backwards. So humans still have to do that work. Humans still have to tag those grotesque images to train the AI. Yep. So we're not actually preventing someone from we're not preventing people from getting PTSD. We're just reducing the number of people who have to get PTSD essentially in order to do that kind of work. It's that specifically isn't something we're looking at. We are going to eventually have the ability to moderate your own Facebook page, that kind of thing, for FUD, for abuse on a crypto level. We're on the fence about doing it as a more broad product for non-Web3 companies. But when we do, I think it would just be Telegram, Discord, those kind of places. I know there are lots of companies in the Web2 space that do use Discord to manage communities. In 2 groups, 4 companies that do that. So there are companies out there. It's just not it's not such a wide thing. When we see that if we ever see that like take off more, where companies are making communities, we'll definitely jump in there.
So this is more, tailored to communities, though, not like, it's tricky too, because if you wanted to do this for Twitter, there's a high likelihood that, Elon Musk is already trying to develop their own, they are developing their own AI model, but some way to kind of do something similar on their platform.
So it's expensive. So we're never going to have a competitor. The platforms are never going to be competitors. because to do this well, you need to essentially be spending a little enough money on per user where it becomes not feasible if you're not charging to do this. So it'll never be a free service that Facebook offers. Facebook's AI for detecting abuse is like super basic. It's got to be like a 300 million parameter model. It's got to be tiny, and it's tiny because they need to run it at scale. They need to run it for their 1 billion users who post inordinate amounts of content every day. So yeah, I don't think the actual platforms will be competitors for the foreseeable future. No.
Do you think there's like a price point where that would be scalable, or that would make sense to do it, or it's just never going to be feasible? Yeah, like charging it as an add-on, like a premium account.
They would need to be just for that feature. They'd need to be making probably about $5. I'm talking on the scale of like billions of users.
Yeah.
Like tens of millions or hundreds of millions of users. You'd need to charge at least $5 a month.
Well, interesting.
So maybe brought up an interesting point. Oh, go ahead, Luke. I was going to derail us.
Premium plus users, but I wouldn't suggest that like any of the like free social media platforms are going to do it.
Yeah.
I was thinking like this is how maybe messed up my brain is in thinking like objectively through these things. Maybe there's some legal liability on these social media platforms as well, because the idea of, let's say, moderating content, whether it's someone just using like a generic slur versus somebody that is posting some very graphic content, that they can essentially chalk that up to like just something that happens on the job, unaccounted for. It's out of our control. It's an external factor. And so, something that maybe we're not so liable for when it comes to psychological damage or PTSD, versus actively hiring someone and saying your job is actively to look through this awful content to feed this AI model. And so I feel like from a legal standpoint, there's completely different liability there. And I don't know if that's something that plays into account. I just completely derailed the conversation, but I just want to throw it out there. I mean, it was crazy.
I remember reading all the in-depth investigations into Facebook around this because they were quite in-depth. I think it's got to be about 4 years ago now. Because it was quite interesting because they were because obviously like we obviously look through data. We have people who are tagging data and stuff like that. So that's interesting to me. And the way they got around with it is they just paid people in India and Africa, and it kind of sucks. They're underpaid. Yeah. They don't have the resources to go get mental health care after seeing dead bodies and awful stuff. And I mean that's the kind of stuff messes you up. And I guess I don't think these are new problems. Is what I'm trying to say.
No.
These are problems that have been around since the internet started getting moderated.
Yeah. Well, what about your alternative? The alternative is overcorrecting, like you said, and just banning anything that could be even close to inappropriate, which is also not a great long-term solution, because now you're just having a very lame, bland version of the internet where nobody can express themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, Luke, I want to ask you about like your own journey, because Octavia, by all means, is a private, centralized company. And so you've got this immense responsibility in understanding censorship and how you want to implement it in your own products. And so, like, how has this been for you mentally, and what kind of challenges have you encountered here in trying to stay true to your vision of like openness and equitable landscape, and still providing a product that brings value for everyone that encounters it?
Yeah, it's been challenging, especially on what we try to classify as FUD, what we classify as explicit FUD and soft FUD, and what's just asking questions. It's very, very challenging. And I think what is really going to help us solve that is once we have enough horizontal data across multiple streams to like start tagging users versus tagging the content. Because at the moment we have a content first approach where we just tag the content as this looks like FUD, this looks like shilling, this looks like normal conversation. Whereas what I want to start doing is saying, hey, this user is disruptive across the board, like not just here but elsewhere. So let's apply a little bit of a higher standard, so that when a user comes in who's, we know from their actions on another group that they're just always chatting, having a great time, and they come in, they're like, hey, this project's a bit of a scam. We can go, this user's actually never like acted maliciously before. Maybe there's a reason for this. Maybe we're not going to apply that same rule set here. So, but we need to get this balance right so that we don't lose customers either, because obviously we are beholden to the projects themselves. But what I want to make sure we're not doing is allowing scammers to use our product to ultimately filter out anyone who's using the project to FUD.
This is incredible. I don't know if it's your intention or not, but some people might be able to interpret this as, you guys creating an internet community social credit score, almost like limiting user access across external communities based on their interactions from communities that you were watching them in, like before that.
Yeah, so I wouldn't describe it as a score. And I don't want to, like, someone's previously asked me when I've started speaking about this, like, will people be able to see their score? Will they be able to dispute it? Like that.
That would be crazy.
And I'm like, no, it's not something we want people to be able to game either. And obviously we will have people try to game it. Because with anything, like when I was working at Bogged, we had this trending section. And when you have this trending section on the top of your site, people try to game it. And we had a lot of visits from Iran. Very specific tokens, So yeah, people will always try to game things like that. I wouldn't call it a credit thing, because everyone is assumed to be good until they start to prove themselves not to be, and then we apply stricter rules to the people who are not acting in the best way. And for most people, this won't even affect them. It's more like we're opening gates for people who are known to be good, than closing them for people who are not known.
So it's more so just like a social accountability, and because everyone's got the same baseline. But if you're demonstrating negative behavior across multiple communities, then by all means, you have like a history of being a bad actor or a fudder, then all of a sudden, limiting access or classifying, I think that's helpful. And I'm not sure how that'll evolve, but it's really interesting discussion regardless.
Say if you go into a community and you're like, hey, buy this token. And then you go to another community like, hey, buy this token. And we've deleted 2 of those. And then we see you in a third community, you're like, hey, what do you think about this token? Well, then we know you're probably just chilling, right? You're not actually asking a genuine question. Now, is that a social credit score? I wouldn't really describe it like that. I would describe it as
starts off obvious.
We're making logical decisions based on the fact that you are clearly doing something wrong over the course of time. Most users won't trigger that kind of protection, but then what we'll be able to do is when someone goes, hey, what do you think about this token? We've got to say, hey, the last 20, 30, 100 messages have all been completely benign. Don't look like they're ChatGPT spam. Don't look like they're malicious or like edited, sort of generated anyway. They look like normal user behavior. This is probably just normal user behavior. Let's let it through.
This is
actually, yeah, that reminds me. So have you had any issues, or do you see any rise in fake AI agents operating autonomously on Telegram or Discord, like people using it the opposite way to join groups and spread either FUD or shilling for a token?
So
or
shilling
something?
messages, most people block shilling messages by like copying the whole shilling message and then like putting it into a filter.
Yeah.
So what the bots do is they edit the shilling message slightly each time. So what we see in our logs is like the same message, but they're like a bunch of different emojis each time. But Octavia catches that every time, because Octavia doesn't care if you just move some characters around. It still looks like shilling and gets deleted.
It's good.
But I think what we'll see is attempts to run it through like ChatGPT, where it goes like rewrite this in a different style, and then try to get through Octavia. But we haven't seen anyone explicitly try to get it through Octavia. I think we will once we get to like the 2,000-3,000 groups. We get to, and then I think that's going to be an interesting challenge. I think we're up for it. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how many groups is Octavia in right now? I don't know what the last number update
Ooh.
was,
The
but
last number update was like 400, but it's definitely a lot higher now because that was about a month ago.
because
I haven't looked
obviously,
at the
like,
database itself over a little bit. We we just released an update that does analytics for your community. Um,
oh, amazing.
Basically allows you to see sentiment, how many people are being abusive, how many chatters you had this week versus last week, um, what percentage of them are shilling, what percentage of the messages have been like just talking about your project, that kind of thing. So we're really excited to see like more usage being picked up because of that. Because I don't think there are good analytics for Discord or Telegram.
No, not really. And
Sorry.
that's
Copy
incredibly
the
useful.
man.
Like, I can't wait to check that out. Yeah, we got to make the most out of using it.
Yeah, absolutely. I did want to talk to you a bit about gaming, Luke. So I'm incredibly bullish on the AI applications in gaming. Um, we could talk about this for hours, but before we dive into some like specific examples of what we envision the future of like AI integration in the world of gaming and Web3 gaming, what's your vision around maybe Octavia integration into some video game economies or ecosystems? Is this something like in your purview? Is it something that you're interested in?
Yeah, so we're already in chats with a few Web3 gaming companies to integrate Octavia moderation specifically into the in-game chat
Hmm.
for the purposes of preventing abuse and just lowering costs, because obviously you don't have to have actual moderation, human moderation rather, for in-game chats. But you still want to allow that sense of community and sense of freedom when you have that. Gaming Web3 is all about social, so um, people want that chat, and we found that a lot of companies have been like, yeah, we want to add chat, but we don't really know what to do about the fact that it's going to get spam, it's going to get shilling, it's going to get all sorts. So we'll be releasing an API very shortly, which will allow anyone to basically integrate their Web3 game and Web3
Hmm.
chat into Octavia and have Octavia filter out the content
Oh man,
according to how they
super
set it up.
bullish.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot
It's
of
very
really cool
useful.
applications here. Yeah, one of our tokenomics clients, they are creating a game where it's kind of like maybe third person shooter, like MMORPG type of game, where there is some sort of like assistant. I don't know if you ever played like Zelda Ocarina of Time, and you have your I forget the name of the fairy, but like every now and again giving you clues, and something sort of like this where there is AI integration. It can help kind of improve the gameplay aspect, give some insights, maybe explain things, or even like, pose some challenges, maybe even like add to the gameplay in the sense of like creating friction or, like complications that can be a little bit more interesting to encounter. Have you thought about incorporating Octavia into a game in this way at all? Because it's kind of like a different application. It's almost just like a singular person that it'd be interacting with.
Yeah, I mean, it's there are lots of things we can do, but I think it's important to keep ourselves focused on just the things that are going to make us money. Um, there
Yeah.
are there are there are things we're working with specific game companies. I haven't got any to announce yet, but
Ooh.
basically we have the 3D model for Octavia, so we'd love you to be able to play as Octavia in some games. Um, so there's some things coming for gaming with Octavia, but as for like a direct like AI integration, I don't think we'll really be doing that. No.
Hmm. We'll
That's fair.
stay. Yeah.
Stick to what you're best at. What makes money. And
Mm.
speaking of making money, we wanted to talk to you about, because we saw some announcements going out recently, but we didn't really, we wanted to hear from you, especially like what's going on next for Octavia, aside from what we've already discussed. But we see that there's like a Launchpad in the works, and
Yeah,
could you help fill us in there and our viewers as well, because I know people are interested in this aspect of it.
yeah. So Octavia, so we've launched Octavia Ventures, and this
Hmm.
is a completely different side of the business with separate staff. So it's not distracting from the development of Octavia. It's something really important to note because
Yeah.
projects can kind of pivot, and we're not pivoting. We're just doing more for our token holders. So you are able to currently stake 200 VIA to get access to a Launchpad on pad.octavia.one. And by doing that, and that's the same staking system that we had previously. So if you're already staked, you're already staked. It's the same system. We've just added the ability to access the Launchpad. And by doing that, you'll get access to our Launchpad. And we're launching we're basically doing private sales. So you'll be able to access, by the time this goes out, we'll have Kavant's AI announced, which is quantitative hedge fund, sort of like quantitative trading for like users. So you'll be able to give it access to your Binance account. It'll be able to trade for you. It's really interesting, really cool tech, really knowledgeable team. I'm quite excited for that one, just from a tech standpoint as well as for the token. We should have announced Pinomo by the time this goes out as well, which is a green energy real world asset platform, and they have some amazing partners who I cannot talk about. So it's bullish. The community is not as strong as it should be yet, but it will get there because of the partners they have. So just stay tuned on that. There's a reason why we've added that to our slot, but we won't be doing the sale until it's a little bit more bullish for you guys. And then we also have, I'm just trying to remember the ones we're allowed to talk about. I think it will just be those two by the time this goes out. So we have some more coming that are definitely more fun. We have two in the GameFi space and one very incredible one who's got a partnership with a major music organization. And that's all I can say without getting in trouble.
That's good. I'm a big fan of music projects, so I'm excited to see what's coming next for you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really exciting. But yeah, it's just ways of rewarding our community, and then also we're investing into a bunch of projects as a way of also generating revenue for our ongoing operations.
It's smart. I mean, I'm glad you made a point to make a note there that it's not going to distract you from the original business, because we see that so often, Sasha and myself. So many businesses they want to take over the world with this idea and launch a blockchain, and then they end up just becoming a launchpad. So it's good that you're not just going to settle for that. Like, you already have your roadmap set out.
Yeah. So the AI dev team has actually grown, and they're not working on the pad. They're not working on anything other than Octavia. So it's really important to us that we have those things separate from a team view, and then making sure those things remain separate. So we continue to keep those guys focused on what they're building, and we continue to incentivize our community and our VR token holders. And we're really excited for what's coming next. We got the Octavia farm, which will be stake via own partner tokens, and that's launching very, very soon.
You can't reveal a date or anything, right? Or is it just
for that one? I don't have an exact date. I think what we made a small mistake. We launched the pad a little bit too early and allowed people to sign up a little bit too early, and there was just a handful of bugs, and we don't want to make the same mistake again. And there was no bugs that caused anything major, because we obviously tested all the contracts, but the front end had a few issues, and we're just making sure that we're not going to make that same mistake. So we're not going to hold ourselves to any specific dates.
That's fair. I mean, you kind of learn from these mistakes. I know I've made these mistakes before, like jumping the gun on an announcement, and then you're like, I wish we held on a little bit longer and prepared for it, but it happens.
Yeah, because everyone wants to know the next thing, but unfortunately, sometimes you learn that sometimes you just gotta let them wait.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. Like, just not from an AI perspective, but just from you founded several companies already. Do you feel this pressure to constantly deliver marketing updates?
There absolutely is
nonstop. Like, you can't have a quiet day ever, right?
No, you can't. But you learn to realize that, like, you can't deliver something faster than it's ready, because if you do, it'll just cause problems. So yeah,
it's good founder advice to live by.
Yeah, I mean, I see that. Like, there's a lot of vaporware announcements out there. People are just scrambling to put some announcement of an announcement out there just to calm the community down a little bit and let them know that something's being done. But we talk about this all the time too. Like, it is easier to raise money right now with the fungible token, but instead of having maybe like 10 equity investors or 5 equity investors, you have 10, 20,000 people you're beholden to that are shouting at you to go in every which direction to develop the company in the way that they think is best for your company.
Yeah, I think what happened was we announced a pad, obviously, and then people were like, "Is the pad actually coming? Have they actually built it? Is it actually a real thing?" Because I think there's a little bit of mistrust with new projects. So what we wanted to do was get that pad out as soon as possible, so people like, "This is the platform. Here you go. You can go sign up. It's real." And that led us to releasing it maybe like a week too early, but it's all good. Like the contracts were tested, everything's been validated. It was just a few front end bugs. We had an issue with getting emails out, like the registration emails. We hit our cap with Amazon, which is, I mean, a good thing, but a bad thing. And that caused some cascading issues and was a bit of a headache. But onwards and upwards,
Yeah. So, I mean, a week is nothing. A week too early.
Yeah.
Easy thing to do.
I like hearing you guys pivot into a number of different promising directions. And so it's always interesting to see a company like, let's say, develop a product, succeed in developing that product. Obviously, there's more journey on the Octavia system and everything that you guys are doing, but then also start to realize there's a greater demand in some other areas and focus on these other areas. So I think like everyone that's probably listening here are incredibly bullish on what they're hearing, and a lot of this is news to us as well. So I'm incredibly bullish. But I think we're coming up on 1 hour, and with that being said, perfect segue into our final sort of segment, Luke. And so what we ask all of the founders, all the people that we have on this podcast before we sign off is, what are you the most bullish on in crypto right now? It can be a person, it can be a project, it can be an asset, it can be a thing. Anything is valid except for your own project.
Wait! Before we do this,
the answer, isn't it?
let's make it special. Let's do one in crypto and one in AI, just to make it more interesting, because you're obviously heavy in both spaces. And also, before you answer, everybody just remember to like, subscribe, leave comments, and definitely check out the links in the show notes below so you can see what Luke's working on and Octavia and find all the websites and information. Sorry to interrupt, but
I think the miniaturization of the real world assets.
Okay.
Yeah, decentralized networks, real world assets. So sort of like, and they're more or less the same thing, really. The DPINs, because they're all just like turning things that are in reality into tradable assets or shareable assets. So they're more or less the same thing, DeepIn and real world assets. And that's what I'm kind of excited for those things maturing. Like we had the first generation in like 2017 with like Power Ledger and like Filecoin and how many? There were so many. But I think that we're going to have like a sort of renaissance of those, and we sort of are already. And those techs will mature, and we'll have some cool products coming out of those. As for AI, look, I don't love the idea of AI generated video. I like when humans create art. I think I'm excited for how much better the smaller LLMs are getting, the ones that can fit on devices. I think like the Samsung has the quick erase on the phone now, and you can like basically remove objects from images without having to use the internet. So that's on-device AI. So that's what I'm really excited about more broadly in AI, on-device AI, getting it closer to the user, because these things use incredible amounts of power. Like you can't run a large Llama 70 billion without like 4 GPUs, 4 49ers, and that's a lot of power.
Scaling it down. Yeah,
and less generalized, more specific use cases too. Like instead of a vague general model that you can use kind of for anything, but it's not really great at any one thing in particular. Maybe translation is the best use case for like a language model.
Yeah,
I think
purpose
language is good for a lot of things, but I like to see these models become more efficient. Not have to use so much power, because that power is cost, right?
Yeah.
So we're able to use, if these models are more efficient, we can either make Octavia cheaper to run or make Octavia better.
Yeah,
It's very true.
absolutely. So yeah, I mean, like more purpose-driven, smaller models, which is interesting because it opens up the landscape for a lot of smaller developers, really. Like there's a need for a lot of these things. And so, maybe it allows more people to come in, participate versus some of these larger, artificial intelligence technology corporations that are trying to eat up the entire market share of the existing industry.
Yeah, I'm excited for what Meta keeps delivering with the open source models. I think there's a need for openness and not this closed model that ironically OpenAI.
Closed AI.
Yeah, well, we don't know how many like how big that model is, what it actually costs to run, anything like that. Whereas we know
Yeah.
what it costs to run a Llama 3 or Llama 2. So yeah, and I think all these open source models. Actually, I think I changed my answer. The answer is open source models. That's what I'm excited for.
Hell yeah.
Nice.
Oh, it's weird that Mark Zuckerberg and Meta is the AI heroes that we
Yeah, if you told me that Mark
didn't know.
Zuckerberg was a good guy like 5 years ago, which is like, what are you on? Like, I want some of that.
Yeah. Irony. And yeah, OpenAI is really closed AI.
Mm.
The irony indeed. Luke, it's been fantastic, man. Thanks so much for coming on board, talking about Octavia, your journey in developing this company, delivering this product to market, and also talking about all things AI, man. We really appreciate the time.
No worries. It's been great.
Yeah. And again, for everyone watching, thanks so much for tuning in. Make sure you check out the show notes, all the links. Catch up on what Octavia is doing in their Telegram group. Check them out across social media. And again, if you like this content, make sure you like, maybe throw us a subscribe. We've got more Boom Room content coming. We've got more eye tests, more investor content, more on-chain analytics videos. And as always, until then, stay safe out there, y'all. Thanks very much. Ciao.